I wanted to do a brief, or we'll see how brief it turns out to be actually, overview of the Berserker Revamp that's coming on Tuesday, and give you guys my take on it if that is something that might be relevant to you. Alright, so in this update, the Warriors Berserker Elite Specialization is seeing a drastic overhaul. The goal of the changes is to give the Specialization more compelling and thematic core gameplay that distinguishes it from base Warrior and Spellbreaker gameplay. I think that's really good. The two elite specs and the base Warrior played very similarly. I would say that Spellbreaker definitely has a unique feeling, and when you play it, it feels like you're playing an elite spec that changes the way the profession plays, and the traits are very impactful and have a lot to change about your playstyle and what your skills can do. Berserker didn't have that. Berserker was basically just, well, for a while it was a better base warrior, and then it became its own sort of Condi hybrid thing, and then it became a worse base warrior, and then really all it's done in PvE is be a Condi build. That's changed a little bit over time, but it doesn't. Nothing about the feel of the profession felt like a Berserker. It just felt like you had this Super Saiyan mode. I guess it's sort of Berserkery. I don't want to really make this too much about feel and roleplay, but I think when most of us think of a Berserker, or when we play other games that have Berserker characters, you think of like some crazy maniac dude with an axe that just attacks wildly and crazy and does like a crazy amount of damage, that sort of thing. You don't think about a guy with a longbow laying down long-range fire fields. That's probably not what you think of, and it's kind of a black eye on ANET that you compare the Berserker spec in Guild Wars 2 to the Berserker spec in every other game, and in Guild Wars 2, it's a longbow wielding Condi build that doesn't do any direct damage. So it's probably good that they are reorienting it towards higher DPS across the board in terms of all of the different weapons. Okay. To this end, the first major changes were moving the Berserk mode to F1 and removing the F2 slot entirely. I really like that. It makes it, in theory, before, you could have played a Berserker like a base warrior and never went into Berserk mode. If you had never gone into Berserk mode and just played the class like a base warrior, it would literally be indistinguishable from a base warrior, except for the fact that you have a couple traits that might do something outside of Berserk mode. So really, it didn't necessarily have to feel like a change at all. This feels like a big change. If you want to burst, you have to go into Berserker, meaning that Berserker is super important to the way the class feels. I really like this change. It's definitely more thematic, which is one thing they were going for, but it also makes it's going to make the class feel a lot different than base warrior, and that I like. Additionally, Berserk mode itself is changed and will grant power and condition-based damage bonuses in exchange for a toughness penalty. So what they have said is that it's going to be like, I think they said something like minus 300 toughness is going to be what you get. My guess is that you're going to get probably a little bit more than 300 power and Condi damage. I would, if it was me, I would make it 300 power, 300 Condi damage in exchange for the 300 toughness. Most likely, if I had to bet, it would be 150 and 150 because they want everything to be equal for some reason. So it goes, we're doing this to solidify Berserker's identity as a powerful but fragile combatant. That's probably true in PvP, and to make it balanced in PvP, you have to add that minus toughness. I think the whole minus toughness thing really coincides with the design of Berserker in other games where he takes more damage but deals more damage. So that's fair. They can't get too crazy with it and give you too many free stats, because in PvE, toughness doesn't necessarily matter. Any big hit in a raid or fractal, you're going to have Aegis for or a dodge. And just the active combat system in general in Guild Wars 2, you can pretty much dodge anything. And anything you can't dodge, you can mitigate through proper positioning. So it's hard to do the whole theme of deal more damage, take more damage, when in theory a good enough player doesn't have to take any damage whatsoever. So I wouldn't expect these bonuses to be too big, simply because the toughness penalty isn't relevant in PvE. So if the toughness penalty isn't relevant in PvE, I wouldn't expect the power and Condi damage bonus to be too relevant, if that makes sense. Moving on. Another change is how Berserk mode is managed. Previously, it was a limited time mode with a set duration. This update changes the primary functionality of rage skills to extend Berserk mode duration rather than granting adrenaline. While they are still useful outside of Berserk mode, proper use while in Berserk mode can dramatically extend the window to use primal bursts. So that's a really cool change. It will take a little bit of muscle memory to not activate your Berserker heal skill to give you the adrenaline. It's going to be weird not getting adrenaline from it, but I mean, we'll see how that goes and how it plays. But I like this idea that, and again, it goes back to the thematic approach to the class, where you activate Berserk mode, your character is in a Berserker rage, and if you don't extend the rage, then you will eventually calm down. But if you have all these rage skills, they just make you angrier when you use them, so you keep going. It's a very cool design. I like that. And hopefully it makes the rage skills a little bit more relevant outside of Shattering Blow, which was the only... Shattering Blow... well, I guess Headbutt was always relevant, and the heal was always relevant, and Shattering Blow was always relevant, so... Hopefully it makes the other lesser used ones a little bit more relevant. I'm especially hopeful in PvE for Wild Blow to be a relevant deep skill in the DPS build, because not only will it do DPS, but it will also be a big CC and also extend your rage time. So that's really good. One thing I would have liked to see was to have the primal bursts count as a rage skill. I think they used to. Or maybe they didn't. I don't know. It would have been nice to see the burst count as a rage skill. What that would have meant was that in PvE, it would have been trivial to keep up 100% Berserk uptime, which might be a little bit imbalanced, but it would make some sense that if you land with a burst skill, that you're getting rage from it. And in PvP, it would make it way more skill testing, and a good Berserker in PvP would be able to keep it up for a much longer time than a bad one. So I would have liked to have seen that, but I understand that it would probably make the rage utility skills less relevant if the burst skills counted as rage skills for those purposes. All right, so we're going to make several changes to Warrior. Blah, 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 blah. So Double Chop. Adjusted the attack timing so the hit occurs later in the animation. Adjusted the damage so the second hit deals more than the first. Total damage and casting times are unchanged. So what this is, people might wonder what this is about. This is about weapon stowing. So if you didn't know, and a lot of players don't know, the damage from the last hit of Double Chop happens with like almost half a second left to go in the animation. So once you saw that the damage floater pop on your screen, you could hit your hotkey for weapon stow, and it would cancel the remaining half a second or whatever it is of animation and go right into triple chop. So you were massively increasing your DPS by weapon stowing after double chop. The point was that it's cancerous. Weapon stowing is cancerous, and I know there's elite players who think it's skill testing, and it's a sign that they're better players, and it makes them feel good about themselves and whatever other delusional things they want to believe. But it was just cancerous, and it wasn't how the game was designed to be. The designers of the game did not intend for people to weapon stow to gain DPS. And maybe it is, and in fact, it might be skill testing. It might be a sign that you're a very strong micro player, and there's a risk-reward to it, because if you stow too early, you get no benefit, and if you stow too late, or if you stow too early, you lose DPS, and if you stow too late, you lose DPS. So whether or not it was skill testing is irrelevant, because it wasn't functioning the way it was designed to function, and it was promoting sort of a very cancerous, toxic playstyle. So, luckily, they have fixed that, and Double Chop, you will no longer get a benefit from weapon stowing, so we like that. Battle Standard, that's sort of a PvP fix, and it's sort of just like a bug fix. Magebane Tether, that is something that we don't care about because of Spellbreaker. Rampage. Alright, Berserker, let's get into the good stuff. We have addressed that. Berserk is no longer instant cast. It has a casting time. Entering Berserk now initiates an attack that damages nearby foes and inflicts burning for 3 seconds. We don't know what the damage is, and we don't know what the cast time is, because it says it has a cast time. Hopefully it's a very big damage skill. Hopefully it hits hard as fuck. Like, you don't want to be around when that hits. So, inflicts burning for 3 seconds. Assuming that Condi duration affects that, you have to imagine that a Condi build is getting a 6-second burn out of it. So you think about a skill that inflicts a 6-second burn, what that damage looks like for a Condi build, and it's a pretty big effect. That's, by my just rough calculations, that's like 30k worth of burning for a Condi build. So if the Berserk power damage is around 30k in a Berserker build, then you have a pretty decent skill there. That's a pretty hard-hitting skill. Berserk mode is no longer a rage skill. Instead, it's considered a level 3 primal burst. Very good. That means you'll have Berserker's power up immediately at the when you get into the combat, and you don't have a ramp up mode. Very good. We like that. Primal burst. Remove some of the visual warm up effects from these skill that could obscure the character. That's probably true. And hopefully it also shortened the animation. Maybe it was just removing a bunch of swirly orange shit, or maybe it actually they just cut the animations so they do more damage over time. That'd be great. Decapitate. This is the axe burst skill. This skill has been reworked. It's now a long-ranged melee attack that does not leap forward and only hits one target. This skill recharges instantly if it hits and can be affected by quickness and slow. So people were like, well, what the hell is a long-range melee attack? A long-range melee attack would be the Firebrand Axe 3, the pull. It's not a projectile because you can't block it like a projectile. And it hits sort of in a conal arc. Another one would be the Warrior Hammer, where it sprays like a fan of damage out. I suspect that's what Decapitate is going to be like. It's going to be like a fan of damage. And it's cool. I like this. I think it'll be good. I think the animation will probably be like the axe swinging out and like really like a very big orange fiery axe swinging out and hitting your target. Hey, if the DPS is better than the current implementation, that'll be great. That's what we want. Arc Divider, the skill has been reworked. It no longer deals bonus damage to low health targets. Instead, it now spins and strikes 3 times. Each strike increases in radius. Very cool skill. Adds more spin to win to the warrior. I suspect it's going to be very powerful. The current Arc Divider doesn't hit very hard, but if it hit 3 times quickly, it would be a very hard-hitting skill. I like it. I think it's a very good good rework, and hopefully it hits hard enough to be worth using. With any luck, it will make Greatsword a relevant part of the PvE Berserker DPS rotation. Rupturing Smash, I believe that is the Hammer Primal Burst. Cleaned up the animation and reduced the casting time. That's fair. Flaming Flurry updated the description and tooltip of the skill to clarify that it blocks missiles. A lot of people didn't know it did that. I knew it did that. But one thing that's interesting about Flaming Flurry is that you could troll groups at Matthias by standing inside of his hitbox when he does his bubble thing, and you could Flaming Flurry to destroy his projectiles before the feedback could. And your group would be like, what happened? We got the feedback. Oh, who knows? And it was actually your Flaming Flurry that did it, so it was cheeky. Rage skills. These skills no longer restore adrenaline by default. Instead, they extend the duration of Berserk mode. Okay, Wild Blow. This skill no longer gives adrenaline or removes conditions. I had no idea it removed conditions. I'll be honest about that. That wasn't relevant to me. Instead, it extends the Berserk duration by 3 seconds if it hits. It also grants 8 seconds of Fury. I'm sure the Fury is relevant in PvP. But 3 seconds of Berserk is pretty good. Sundering Leap, cleaned up animation, reduced its casting time by 1/10 of a second. No longer grants adrenaline. Instead, it extends Berserk by 5 seconds. Okay. It would be nice if it got a damage boost so that it was a PvE relevant skill. I feel like without a damage boost, it's not as good as Wild Blow. And and as I will talk about when I summarize, there is very little space on a warrior's utility bar. So a skill has to be very good to make it to the warrior's utility bar. And I don't think Sundering Leap, even with a 5-second Berserk extension, is going to get us there. Outrage, this skill no longer grants adrenaline. It extends Berserk by 1 second. It extends by 5 seconds if a stun is broken. If you are using Outrage with Headbutt, you will be getting the most Berserk duration bang for your buck that you can get. However, Outrage doesn't do any damage. So with Wild Blow, you get much worse Berserk uptime extension, but it's a very high damaging skill. With Outrage and Headbutt as a combo, you're not really getting any damage from Outrage, but you could. I haven't done the math on it, but it's probably very close to permanent Berserk mode. Whether or not that's relevant, we'll see. From what I've heard and what I've seen the math from, you should be able to keep with just Wild Blow, Headbutt, and your heal skill. You should be able to keep Berserk up for like 90 seconds at a time or close to it. So then you'll have 90 seconds of uptime, like the 10 seconds of downtime, and then back to 90 seconds. So that's pretty good uptime as it is. This might not be a relevant thing. It might not be worth trading the Wild Blow DPS. Blood Reckoning, this is the heal skill. It only recharges Primal Burst instead of all bursts. That's fair. And it extends Berserk mode by 2 seconds. It doesn't give adrenaline anymore, which means you can't go burst, Blood Reckoning, burst. You'll have to do something like burst, 100 blades, then burst. Something that will refill your bar, or burst, axe auto attack, burst, Blood Reckoning, axe auto attack, burst. You'll have to do something like that it's much less powerful. Not giving the adrenaline makes this skill much less powerful. The Primal Burst skills weren't on very long, especially since we're going to be using Discipline in this build, guaranteed. The Primal Burst skills weren't on very long cooldowns to begin with, so I don't think recharging them is necessarily relevant. When you're talking about a skill that only had a 3.5 or 4 second cooldown with Alacrity to begin with, or maybe less, recharging them but not giving you the adrenaline is low value. It was recharging and giving you the adrenaline that made this a very high value skill. So we'll see if it's even worth activating. It might be such a big DPS loss that you don't even care about the 2 seconds. We will see. Time will tell. Shattering Blow, not granting adrenaline. I'm trying to think if that is super relevant to the PvE warrior build, Condi Warrior. It kind of is relevant for times where you used it outside of Berserk to get... A lot of times you would use like a non-Berserk longbow burst and then Shattering Blow to refill your adrenaline so you could go back into Berserk with no penalty from having used that longbow burst. But now you don't have the non-Berserk longbow burst, so the adrenaline is a lot less relevant. And inside of Berserk, you've never had a problem with, since your crits give you double adrenaline, you've never had a problem refilling your adrenaline on time. So I don't feel that Shattering Blow is a big loser here. I think in any event, Shattering Blow is going to be gaining in use. It's going to be even more important for the Condi build. Headbutt, great skill. Now it extends Berserk duration. That's good. We like it. To be used rotationally in PvE, the self-stun is a problem, and I assume we're not going to be using Outrage. To use this rotationally in PvE, you're going to need somebody in your group spamming stability. Hopefully, the stability is a very common thing to get. If we were back in the old Chrono meta where Chaos Chrono was just keeping perma 11 boons up on you, this would be great because you'd constantly have stability to blow with this. Now it's a lot more questionable whether you'll have stability, so you may use it rotationally, you may not. Additionally, maybe it's just so good that you just use Outrage instead of Wild Blow. We'll see. Dead or Alive, the trait increases incoming healing by 10%. That's PvP relevant. Bloody Roar, this trait, damage bonus from this trait goes from 10 to 20%. That's much better for a Grandmaster trait. A Grandmaster trait that only gave 10% damage some of the time, I think it worked out to be a 7% damage boost. That's terrible. A Grandmaster trait that only gives you 7% is really terrible. Now it's 20%, and now Berserker uptime is around 90%. So 90% of 20%, we're looking at an 18% damage boost or something like that. I don't know. I can't do the math at this hour. That's a much more reasonable Grandmaster trait. It could be a little bit better still, but it's a more reasonable Grandmaster trait. Eternal Champion, that's whatever. That's a PvP deal. Savage Instinct, again, that's a PvP deal. Fatal Frenzy, PvP deal. Always Angry. This trait has been reworked and renamed Burst of Aggression. So Always Angry was a 7% damage boost because it gave you 7% power damage and 7% Condi damage. So that's gone. Burst of Aggression grants quickness and super speed for 3 seconds. So that's terrible. Here's why this is dumb. You're not going into Berserk very often in PvE. So this has really become a PvP trait where you actually go in and out of Berserk. So we lose 7% damage. That's a big nerf to the Condi build, especially because the Condi build is unlikely to still use Discipline. It would be going to Tactics, would be my guess. So losing the 7% damage from Condi build, the Condi Banner Warrior is going to be much lower on the totem pole than it was before. So we'll see. But the power build losing 7% sucks. That means basically, essentially what we've gained from Bloody Roar, we lose with Always Angry. I don't know. It's tough to say. And then Smash Brawler, this trait no longer reduces the recharge of Berserk mode and Primal Burst, instead extends the duration of Berserk mode by 5 seconds. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That'll be a must, obviously, in PvE. So okay, let's sum it up. Let's wrap up. What do we think? So my overall impressions is that the Condi Warrior build, losing Always Angry and losing access to bursts outside of Berserk, means that the Condi Warrior build will almost certainly be using tactics with Burning Arrow again as its main build, and it's going to get a slight kick in the teeth from DPS. The plus side will be, and the change to Smash Brawler is very relevant. Losing the recharge of Primal Burst, the 33% recharge, means you're not going to be using Scorched Earth as often. You're going to be auto-attacking with Longbow a lot more. So I expect the Condi Banner Warriors DPS to come way down. I would assume that the Condi DPS Warrior build is probably dead. I may regret saying that. It might be that you'll be able to keep your... You might be able to play Headbutt, Outrage, and Shattering Blow in the heal, and keep up Perma Berserk with and just love life. Maybe, but I want to say that the damage nerf is enough from Always Angry that Condi DPS build is probably in big trouble. So then, what do we really care about? We care about PvE Power Warrior. My guess would be that the Banner Warrior is going to be really awkward to play, and here's why. Banner Warrior or Power Warrior. So here's the big problem. Let me reframe. The big problem is peak performance. Peak performance means that you, in a Banner build, you have one utility slot on your bar, and you can't bring Wild Blow in a Banner build because you have to have Throw Bolus on your bar to activate peak performance. So a Power Berserker Banner build is going to have a lot less Berserk uptime as a result of not being able to use Wild Blow or Outrage. The pure DPS build will likely, very likely, be very good. It's possible that you'll go with Kick, Bull's Charge, and Wild Blow, or Kick, Bull's Charge, and Outrage to maximize your Berserk and peak performance uptime. It's also entirely possible that you'll go Outrage, Wild Blow, and Throw Bolus and have Perma Berserk mode. I would imagine that Headbutt followed by Outrage followed by Wild Blow, using those together is going to give you Perma Berserk mode, but I'm not entirely sure how the math works out on that. It might be just better than having higher peak performance uptime. We'll see. But really, right now, the overall big picture is for Power Warrior is that peak performance limits what the Berserker can do. It's such a powerful trait, you have to build around it. The comparison that I make is that imagine if Fresh Air on Elementalist was an adept trait. It would totally change the way essentially every Elementalist build plays, because it's so powerful for an adept trait, and it's such a playstyle defining trait that every LE build would be Fresh Air, just because it's so powerful for an adept trait. Well, Warrior's in a similar situation to that, where you have this trait that radically changes your playstyle, and it's at the adept level, so there's really no alternative. So every Power Warrior build is a peak performance build. That's probably unhealthy for Berserker and even Spellbreaker, especially Spellbreaker, because it has some synergy with Spellbreaker, because the CCs that you use from peak performance synergize with the Spellbreaker traits, but Berserker really doesn't. Berserker wants to be using Rage, like a pure DPS Berserker build wants to be using Rage skills as its utility skills. It doesn't really want to be using Kick to activate peak performance, but it has to, because peak performance is so powerful again at the Adept tier that it warps the build. If I could wish list and say how I would change it, one thing I would do is I would take peak performance and move it to Grandmaster in strength, so that it was either peak performance or Berserker's power, and then keep the 20% damage, but make the effect that it has on physical skills even better, so that in PvP, most likely you would end up taking peak performance instead of Berserker's power, or instead of the other one, the heals, the might makes right, or whatever it is. But then in PvE, you have a clear choice of just taking Berserker's power, and you don't get peak performance. So then at the Adept tier, one thing Warrior is lacking crit chance bonuses. Right now, Warrior has to take an absolutely absurd amount of crit chance boosting Assassin's gear, and it really holds back what Warrior's DPS is capable of, because we are gimping ourselves with Assassin's gear. So I would add a trait at the Adept level in strength that was like gain 10% crit chance for 7 seconds after you land a burst, successfully hit with a burst skill, or gain 1% crit chance for each stack of might. I think those are both completely reasonable and fair Adept skills. Obviously, the might one is way better than the 10% one, but you can balance the numbers however. But I think it would be relevant to have a crit boosting skill there, so that Warrior could actually get rid of some of that Assassin's gear, and actually have a nice DPS boost as a result. So what do I think overall? Overall, I think that I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that Power Banner Warrior is going to be very awkward to play. My guess is that it's going to be really uncomfortable to play, since you don't get to use Wild Blow or Outrage, and you're going to have a lot more Berserker downtime, especially since you have to have Throw Bolus on your bar. I would expect that the Condi Longbow build this is just a guess, and I don't know how it's going to shake out, because again, we haven't seen the numbers of Arc Divider or Decapitate, but my guess is that the banner build is going to be Condi, and the pure DPS build is going to be Power, because the pure DPS build will have 2 more utility skills open, not having banners, that it can bring to keep up Berserker uptime. So I expect there to be a pure power Berserker DPS build, which, hey, I'm all for that. And I'm expecting the Condi build to still be the banner build. And that's what I think it'll be. We'll see what it shakes out to be. We'll see what people can do on the DPS golem as far as rotations. Rotations are going to change very, 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 very much. So I think this is a very, very big change overall. And it's going to turn how PvE Warrior is played upside down. And I'm looking forward to it, cautiously optimistic. I'm hoping everything shakes out to be good. And I'm hoping if it shakes out to be not good, that they are quick with tweaking it and making it good. So we shall see. If it's awesome and everything's cool, I will probably do an updated Warrior build guide for Condi and Power. It'll be pretty comprehensive because we'll have we'll have banners, we'll have DPS builds, we'll have all that shit, and it'll be a very good video. So anyway, that's it for me. These are my thoughts. If you have thoughts, share them in the comments below, and I will be testing this stuff out on Tuesday. So I will see you then, guys. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.